Gaga Grumps says give peeps a minute.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Dancing Queen says, is Grumps your husband?
Welcome gremlins to the game
Grumps says
grotto.
at Dancing Queen so far.
Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcoming guys.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto.
Grab your
Take a seat,
heartbeat.
grab your daily
Share
heart,
us round.
claim your points
Now
and
tap
prepare
that
to play.
screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Gang gremlins on the scene. 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 Now tap that screen. Tap. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcoming guys, settle down. Grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says don't know what happened there.
Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Grumps says let's try this again.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Grumps says at Bradley no.
Gaga Grumps says so hiccups aside how we doing.
Grumps says welcome again, one and all. Grumps says at ST4RS Amahaya.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says D in the house.
Grumps says it, Abigail, hold your horses.
Gaga Grumps says have a special format Abigail. We'll be starting in a minute.
Grumps says it. Abigail, I know, that's not how we play. Start letter is decided by the wheel.
Gaga Grumps says who's ready to play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says the wheel of Wordle doom. Grumps says it Caesar _670 higher.
Lucas says brain.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. B. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts beat flying, like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with B, please, Anshika.
And Sheikah says bagel.
Benjamin is in the house.
We would be honored
Gaga
if
Grumps
you would
says
join
creative in the
us.
house. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, D.
We would be honored if you would join us.
LL Creative 1 says hiya Gaga. Grumps says ooh, a nice salt beef bagel would be lovely now. Grumps says it ill Creative 1 hair.
Gaga Grumps says yellow E and L in need of homes.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Luca in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
DVP says slope.
Will Creative One says hey at Grumps.
Nope.
And Sheikah says lemon works.
Gaga Grumps says lemon fits.
Grumps says it and she can know plurals in Wordle. Grumps says it ilikeches. Hey there.
Gaga Grumps says E moved into number 2 Wordle Street, L still homeless.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says thanks Ches.
DVP says welly.
Gaga Grumps says I like welly. Tests both places for the L.
Creative One says jelly.
Gaga Grumps says L moved in next door to E.
Well, Creative One says delve.
Gaga Grumps says can't be a Ellie word. Gaga Grumps says delve is a good shout. Gaga Grumps says danger zone, but I don't think we have many options to choose from.
PWEW says selves.
Lucas says melts.
Dancing Queen says that P_W doesn't have an L.
Nope.
Gaga Grumps says relic is brilliant.
Creative One says helix.
Gaga Grumps says helix is in the grid.
Grumps says last chance salute.
Gaga Grumps says I can't look.
Lucas says yeah, Helix. Dancing Queen says let's do it.
Good game.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box!
Gaga Grumps says yay for Helix.
Don't let her lose! Grumps is on the buttons! Don't
Gaga
let him
Grumps says
push
GG
yours!
Gremlins.
Are
Let's
you
see
ready
those
to
W's in the
play?
chat.
Let those stickers fly! Which team are you
DVP
on?
says
Team
you.
Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you
Good
ready?
game.
Team Grumps, are you steady? Game.
Good game.
Let's go!
Gaga Grumps says DVD for Gaga. Share the live chat the chat and shower her with roses and
Good
GGs.
game. Good game. Good game.
Well, creative one says
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says Lexi in the house.
Benjamin is in the house! Gremlins, let's go! Game!
Grumps says at Lexi High.
Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. S. Gaga Grumps says CJ on the nose.
Lucas says Saka.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Thanks for the follow. On fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with S, please, Lexi. Gaga grumps says Soapy you got. Gaga grumps says a yellow A in need of a home.
DVP says large.
Lucas says a bossy.
Gaga grumps says large fits.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga grumps says we added a homeless E. Gaga grumps says teach works.
DVP says teach Noah.
Grumps says at lrx.lcm higher.
Lucas says Azeri.
Luca says Azeri.
Gaga grumps says no change 10 letters wiped from the game. Gaga grumps says oops your RRGHTD.
Grumps says at Lowry Morgan Hayer. Lucas says Azeri. Clarilis says Noel.
Gaga grumps says Noel for equal.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga grumps says Claire in the house. Clarilis says hey Gaga, hope you're well X. Gaga grumps says can't be learn.
Grumps says at Lowry Morgan fine, cheers, yourself. Grumps says at Clarilis welcome back.
Lucas says a bend.
Grumps says at DMV Hayer.
Claire Ellis says at Grumps happy Saturday Grumps.
Lucas says Abend.
Grumps says at Luca, English only.
DVP says Adder.
Claire Alice says added.
Gaga grumps says no T and R for extra.
DVP says no R.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga grumps says oh would they do 3DS. Luca says Abid.
Grumps says it no why.
Gaga Grumps says of course they would lol.
Claire Ellis says never had one with 3 of the same letter, but am out of ideas.
Grumps says they would not.
Gaga Grumps says danger zone. How about a consonant heavy filter?
Claire Ellis says that SAFC is back. It's not steel. No ST or L.
Lucas says freak.
Grumps says knave. Grumps says it Luca, no R.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says Noah in number 3.
Lucas says clean.
Gaga Grumps says no resting sad face cause I'm thinking lol.
Grumps says AMR.
Gaga Grumps says yeah dream only displacement. We need letters more than placementer. Gaga Grumps says dream only tests an M.
Lucas says bleak.
Gaga Grumps says Jesse might have the save. DVP says enema.
Grumps says enema.
Gaga Grumps says still only tests the M but is a solve too.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says GG's for Jesse.
Grumps says that rinsed it out.
Good game.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
A random star chosen by fate. Play your
Gaga
part,
Grumps says
it's
thanks for the
like
visual
it.
grumps.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra-da-da. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Good game. Good game. Good game.
In three, it's do or die. Only
Good
in
game.
three.
Good
A
game.
pretty sky.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up
Good
next
game.
week.
Wordle with Gaga.
Good game.
Wordle with Gaga.
Good game.
Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. F.
We would be honored if you would join
Gaga
us.
Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Thanks for the follow. Like-a-thon, race to the top. Like-a-thon, tap and don't stop. Like-a-thon, who will be crowned? Like-a-thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire. Like-a-thon, hearts beat flying. Like-a-thon, gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Lights the fire. Lights the fire. Lights the fire.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with F, please Grumps.
Benjamin is in the house.
Grumps says Fable.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says PH7 in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says Fable you got.
PH7 says banjo.
Gaga Grumps says a green A moved into 2-word LW Street B needs a home.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Charmaine in the house.
We
Thanks
would
for
be
doing your daily
honored
heart.
if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says banjo fits.
Grumps says it Emmy can be.
Gaga Grumps says we start BA.
Or Creative One says basic.
Gaga Grumps says no plurals in Wordle.
PH7 says be azzy.
Charmaine says bairn.
Gaga Grumps says basic works.
Grumps says at Samuelio 00 no plural.
Claire Ellis says bairn.
PH7 says body.
Grumps says at Emmy no E.
Gaga Grumps says no change 9 letters wiped from the game. Gaga Grumps says bawdy is a shout.
Grumps says it pack them all no S, no plurals.
Gaga Grumps says Y moved into number 5.
Oscar says barky.
PH7 says either baggy or batty.
Claire Ellis says baggy.
Gaga Grumps says danger zone. Options needed for filter.
Oscar says barky.
Oscar says gucky.
PH7 says Barry not a solve.
Grumps says at MR Trappy no DL.
Thanks for the follow.
DVP says baggy.
Gaga Grumps says baggy it is with the help of a grump.
Grumps says at Connie you a lot, and also out of here.
To the game grotto. Welcome, gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcoming guys, settle down.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, it's your warm-up routine.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Good game.
Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Game gremlins, come, let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Crystal says good morning.
Good game.
Game gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Good game.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Grumps says it's Crystal's morning.
Gaga Grumps says Crystal in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Crystal says at Grumps, how are ya?
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says at Crystal Saturday, yourself.
Gaga Grumps says Jenny in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grumps says at Monica Kuzminska 916 no.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. K. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says it was AQ really, you nudged it.
Jenny Wallace 375 says not.
Crystal says it's Rumps, thank goodness for the weekend I get to hang out longer.
Gaga Grumps says a kicking cue. Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at Crystal hooray for Saturday morning coffee.
Gaga Grumps says oh creative, nearly had it and then Jogi jumped them at the last second.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with K please Jogi.
Crystal says at Grumps, yes.
Grumps says at Edda's no.
Gaga Grumps says Kings you got.
Benjamin is in the house.
Grumps says my bully has arrived.
Charmaine says goin'.
Someone says at Grumps AGLLO.
Oscar says clown.
Gaga Grumps says I don't curate the first word, but if you use a plural you sacrifice a lucky Wordle in one.
We would be honored. Jenny Wallace 375 says gnome.
Grumps says it coming back in 2027, that's 6 letters. Charmaine says gnome.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the go pops Jenny.
Grumps says it's summer morning.
Gaga Grumps says gnome fits. Gaga Grumps says O moved into number 3G and N still homeless.
Crystal says wrong.
Jenny Wallace 375 says wrong is goat.
Gaga Grumps says could we go wrong with wrong? Gaga Grumps says we end in wrong.
Oscar says prong.
Crystal says prong.
Gaga Grumps says I only see the one option.
Summer says at Grumps hello hello.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thanks for the follow.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Oscar in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says Summer in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Summer says I leveled up again.
Level up.
Marvel Omega OFC says sorry, but do you not talk?
Grumps says it's summer.
Crystal says it's summer.
Gaga Grumps says prong in 4.
game.
Summer says at Marvel Omega OFC pin video.
Gaga Grumps says
Good
GG
game.
Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
It's a LLL level up. I guessed it wrong.
Good game.
Guessed it right. Now here we are, another height. If support was levels,
Good game.
you'd spell wow. This level's ours. Come out.
Gaga Grumps
Good
says I am
game.
non-speaking. There is a pinned post on my
Good
page
game.
explaining.
That glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo.
Good game.
Support came in. Guess it snapped. Level unlocked. Shout out chat.
Good game.
New
Gaga Grumps
Good
says a
game.
quick segue for this. Level up in the room for summer.
Good game.
Tomorrow we guess same time,
We
same
would be
chance,
honored
same
if
brilliant
you would
brain.
join us.
Marvel Omega UFC says, I'm sorry.
Good game. Good game.
Marvel Omega OFC says I didn't check.
Good game.
Grump says it's summer.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for leveling up in the room summer. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Summer says at Gaga and Grump's third day in a row.
Gaga Grumps says you're on a roll. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart creative. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart marvel. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Jenny Wallace 375 says at Gaga
We would
and
be
Grumps
honored
Q.
if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. I.
Welcome line later to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says CJ in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song
CJ to
chooses
3
the
for
first
9,
word.
following says hello.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned like a thon, gremlin renowned like a thon, fingers on fire like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grump says at Sydney66 stop spamming.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with I please Crystal.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says lion in the house thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grump says at Suzanne Gay Island is 6 letters.
Gaga Grumps says did I say in the house, thanks to CJ.
Crystal says ivory.
CJ to 3 for 9 following says yes.
Gaga Grumps says ivory you got. Gaga Grumps says okay senile moment.
Crystal says I had to think of I word low.
Gaga Grumps says yellow O and R in need of a home.
Crystal says rumor.
CJ 2349 following says wrong is a good one.
Thanks for the follow.
DVP says rota.
Gaga Grumps says so you went with yesterday's daily solve lol.
CJ to 3 for 9 following says wrong.
Lion Lotus says order.
Gaga Grumps says organ fits. Gaga Grumps says no change 6 letters wiped from game. Gaga Grumps says shall we tr wrong in 3 again lol.
Grump says wrong would have been stingy.
Will Creative 1 says throw.
Crystal says rumor still fits.
Gaga Grumps says no can't be wrong now.
Grump says wrong, bleeding autocorrect.
Gaga Grumps says throw works.
CRLOVRCJ says Lee Wordle.
Grump says at Lee your wildest dream coming true.
Gaga Grumps says R and O moved into 3 and 4.
Grumps says at Jonah Gonzaga Mirasol higher.
Gaga Grumps says can't be crown.
DVP says strop.
Grumps says at Lee it only gets wilder from here. Grumps says at D tilde V tilde P no T.
Thanks for the follow.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says no T.
DVP says error.
Gaga Grumps says and no it's not Xerox lol. Gaga Grumps says yes Lee in a fashion.
Crystal says error.
Grumps says Xerox might even work.
Karlovich says error is a good one.
Gaga Grumps says no R in 2 for error. Gaga Grumps says I was trying to prove Xerox wouldn't be valid and failed lol.
Scaffoldstith says good evening Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says it can't be error.
DVP says fraud.
We would be honored if you would join
Grumps
us.
says that Lee Green are in correct place. Yellows are not. Grey is not in word.
Gaga Grumps says Jack in the house thanks for doing your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says Steve in the house.
Grumps says at scaffold Steve plus equals welcome back.
Gaga Grumps says Sprog is a shout.
Summer says at Frying Scotsman 8 1 it can't be zeros.
Jack Wright says frog.
Gaga Grumps says no it isn't lol. Karlova CJ says there is no G.
Scaffoldstiff says at Grumps everything is all back together now. I need to catch up on laundry.
Grumps says it Amy no G.
Good game.
Crystal says Jura.
It's playtime! Jack Wright says it, Gaga and Grumps welcome. Don't let her lose!
Gaga Grumps says Jura is in 5 grip.
Don't
Grumps says at Scaffold Steve plus equals that's a problem for tomorrow.
Scaffold Steve says at Crystal Crystal.
Gaga Grumps says we haven't eliminated the second arc.
Jack Wright says Jira.
Scaffold Steve says Grumps don't have anything left. Has to be good.
Gaga Grumps says Jira in 5.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says do the do for Gaga. Share the live chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Thanks for the follow.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Scaffold Stiff says at Grumps, if I didn't have to get groceries today, I definitely would.
Grumps says at Scaffold Steve plus equals delivery. Grumps says at abdul@gmail.com yes.
Summer says sorry, if I'm quiet today, I've had a bad day. So not really in the mood. To interact JS watching.
Grumps says at Scaffold Steve plus equals ha. Didn't I know that problem?
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Steve.
Grumps says at Summer you may bully me for 10 minutes.
Gaga Grumps says we understand.
Crystal says at Summer hoped we cheer you up.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Good game. Good game. Good game.
Summer says at Grumps I'm not really in the mood Yoda TBF.
Summer says at Summer today asterisk.
Scaffold Stiff says at Grumps I DoorDashed a family meal the other day and they forgot half the order.
Grumps says at no times I'll come again.
Gaga Grumps says haha we shall all call Grumps Yoda from now on.
Summer says at Gaga and Grumps yes.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says at Summer that's not good. What if I demanded a thorough summer bullying?
Summer says at Grumps.
Scaffold Steve says at Grumps, nice guess.
Gaga Grumps says he got one.
Crystal says at Grumps your cue.
The creative one says Grump's favorite letter.
Grumps says at scaffold Steve plus equals full refund, of course.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Q.
Grumps says huzzah.
Scaffold Steve says at Grumps, so the refund wound up more than the meal cost.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Scaffold Stuff says, and how is Gaga doing today?
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Everybody get down! It's a freaking sniper! Ha ha!
Gaga Grumps says creative made it to the top of the list and Grumps stole the crown.
Summer says I only tapped that once, so I was higher than Grumps on the leaderboard poos. It's his fav letter.
Crystal says wipeout coming soon.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Q, please Grumps.
Grumps says chord, let's have a wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says what the game or the like racely.
Grumps says it's summer and neither of us made it to the top 4.
Summer says it Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says chord you got. Gaga Grumps says wipeout denied.
Scaffold Steve says radio.
Grumps says boo.
Charmaine says radio.
Crystal says at Grumps your new crown was coming law.
The creative one says cargo.
Gaga Grumps says Radio Gaga is in the grid.
Grumps says at Crystal I had a hunch.
Scaffold Steve says favor.
Gaga Grumps says they moved into number 2. R and O are homeless.
A creative one says Carol.
Grumps says at Yang Balandi 0R project where is an R in audio.
Crystal says mayor.
Gaga Grumps says favor works.
Grumps says at Carl Sedgwick.
Emily says Carol.
Gaga Grumps says O moved into number 4. R must live in 3.
Scaffold Steve says Baron.
Charmaine says razor.
Grumps says at FRANKLINRA no.
Gaga Grumps says Carol is a shout.
Scaffold Steve says at MZZ no spamming please.
Gaga Grumps says Carol in 4. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Crystal says at Emma Lazy ZZ Parole has it.
Grumps says at FRANKLINRA no.
Chosen by fate, play a part, it's a live day.
Good game.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with
Gaga Grumps says can you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and we'd love you to share your results.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grumps says I feel dancing.
Crystal says at Grumps let's see.
Shout! It's cool.
Gaga Grumps says it's wiggle time.
It's Cooper. Thanks for the follow.
Grumps says Cooper time.
Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? He's a corgi, don't you know? His name is Cooper. Watch him go.
Crystal says have to rebuild.
Just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt. Wiggle butt, just a little mud with the wiggle butt. Gremlin say what? With the wiggle butt.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for the wiggles. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says at Rye, welcome back.
Crystal says Grumps.
Grumps says at Scaffold Steve plus equals.
Scaffold Steve says hey I got one.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Aptly enough. W for wiggles. Gaga Grumps says Steve on the nose. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned like a thon, gremlin renowned like a thon, fingers on fire like a thon, gremlins don't tire like a thon, hearts be flying like a thon, gremlins
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with W please Summer.
Summer says right.
Gaga Grumps says I ain't no lady though lol.
Scaffold Steve says grown.
Summer says prowl.
Crystal says strong.
Gaga Grumps says R lives at number 2 Wordle Street, W needs a home.
DVP says arrow.
Gaga Grumps says grown fits. Gaga Grumps says W moved into number 4.
Scaffold Steve says brawl.
Gaga Grumps says Brawl works.
Charmaine says crawl.
Crystal says crawl.
DVP says troll.
DVP says crawl.
Thanks for the follow.
Scaffoldstiff says I believe it's just the two.
Gaga Grumps says I see 2 options for 3 guesses, no filter needed.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says crawl
Thanks
is
for
in the grid.
follow.
Gaga Grumps says crawl in 4.
Good game.
Scaffoldstiff says in Road to SSL that's too many letters. Please don't spam.
Welcoming guys, settle down, grab your heartbeat.
Good game.
Share us round.
Gaga
Now
Grumps
tap that
says
screen,
GG
tap it,
Gremlins.
tap it, tap
Let's
that
see
screen,
those
yeah, tap it,
W's in
tap
the
it.
chat.
It's your warm-up routine. Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Good game. Good game.
Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Good game. Good game.
Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says welcome
Good game.
Gremlins to the game grotto.
Good
Take a
game.
seat, grab your daily heart,
Good game.
claim your
Now
points
tap
and
that
prepare.
screen.
Good game.
Tap it, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, tap it. Gang Gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Gang
Gaga
Gremlins on the
Grumps says
scene.
treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next one.
Crystal says, is it spring break?
Gremlins on the scene.
Grumps says at Road to SSL actually. What you do in our room is our choice.
Scaffold Steve says that Crystal gotta be.
A creative one says, Gaga and Grumps, can you move the box to see if I can see it on my end?
Gaga Grumps says yes, Easter holidays started yesterday.
Eggs and Bacon says, hello there, everyone.
Gaga Grumps says what about now creative?
Grumps says at Eggs and Bacon welcome back.
Scaffoldstiff says at Exam Bacon, hi, welcome in.
A creative one says, no, can't see it.
Benjamin is in the house.
Gaga Grumps says eggs in the house.
Rare says hi, is Gaga frozen?
Gaga Grumps says shame, I don't understand why it's restricted.
Scaffold Stiv says at Exam Bacon, are the eggs fried or scrambled?
Grumps says at Ryer, I know. Why?
Gaga Grumps says cryogenically. Lol.
Crystal says treasure box is in gifts.
Rare says I can't play.
Join us.
Gaga Grumps says Rai in the house.
The creative one says I can get treasure boxes for super fans.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Eggs and Bacon says it's Scaffold Steve plus equals scramble.
Summer says okay, I'm off.
Crystal says at Summer, have a better day, Summer.
Gaga Grumps says be gentle with yourself, Summer XX.
Scaffold Stiv says at Eggs and Bacon.
Summer says have a good day, both of you.
Grumps says at Summer, have a good day, lots of strength.
Summer says at Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. S for Summer.
Summer says at Crystal, thanks.
Scaffold Stiv says at Summer, have an amazing day.
Grumps says at BL0SM, welcome back.
The LO song says what has happened. I was gone for one day.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word. Summer says bloody hell, everyone's
The LOSSOM says at Grumps hello.
Grumps says at BL0SM, the planet did a whole rotation.
Crystal says B.O.B. gotta go, refill morning.
Grumps says at Summer, you are popular.
The LOSS says at Grumps, what happened to Wordle?
Grumps says at Crystal, splish splash.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Go green. Summer says at Grumps YAA.
BL Osam says new stickers.
Grumps says at BL0SM, it's all happening around here.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with S, please, Charmaine. BL0SSOM says that Grumps new stickers as well.
Charmaine says shirt.
Gaga Grumps says Blossom in the house, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Grumps says at BL0SM, no holds barred, no costs avoided.
Gaga Grumps says yes, new stickers, and we ran out of Wordle archives.
Rory says I.
Gaga Grumps says shirt you got.
Grumps says at Rai, is it working now?
Summer says now I wanna stay at what's wrong W me today, honestly.
Rory says I logged out and came back and still restricted.
Gaga Grumps says huddle Summer.
Scaffoldstiff says at Summer it's just one of those days.
Good game.
Grumps says at Summer just one of those days. If you have nothing you need to attend, just go with your flow.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Crystal says at Summer nice, glad you changed your mind.
Eggs and Bacon says pulley.
Eggs and Bacon says pulley.
Summer says okay, I'm staying for the last 20 minutes.
BLOSSOM says cloak.
A creative one says place. BLOSSOM says cloak.
Gaga Grumps says first wipeout of the day, now give Gaga her first fireworks too.
Grumps says at Summer haha. One of us, one of us.
Eggs and Bacon says pudding. Summer says at Grumps yes.
Gaga Grumps says place fits. Gaga Grumps says it's a double.
Grumps says it's something you can check out anytime. You can have a look.
Crystal says wipeout.
Bull0 Som says Buggy Dummy Bunny is why thought.
Scaffoldstiff says mound.
Summer says at Grumps I won't ever lead for good. This is my favorite part of the day. Always cheers me up.
Crystal says why word coming in.
Gaga Grumps says are we now the Hotel California?
The creative one says foggy.
Grumps says at Gaga and Grumps we are on a summer holiday.
Gaga Grumps says let's give the Easter Bunny a spin.
Summer says buddy.
A creative one says Buffy.
Gaga Grumps says nearly had my friggin' fireworks. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart rai.
The LO sound says buddy, buggy, and bummy.
Jenny Wallace 375 says buggy.
Peanuts here! Peanuts here!
Il Creative 1 says buddy.
Grumps says I want it to be BURPY, shame.
Crystal says BGF beforg.
BL0SSOM says Buffy as well.
Bo Zero Sum says buggy, Buffy, buddy, bummy.
Gaga Grumps says before to filter just in case.
Thanks for the follow. Thanks for the follow.
The LO sound says buddy.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says buddy is must be.
Crystal says DD it is.
Good game.
BL0SSOM says Bobby and Bummy.
Go green.
Gaga Grumps says we get to use the new sticker. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Summer says see him so smart I said that when it wasn't funny I'm joking, well done.
Push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly! Which team are you on? Team
Gaga Grumps says lol indeed Summer.
are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins,
Gaga Grumps says doobadoo for Gaga. Share the live, chat the chat, and shower her with roses and GGs.
Grumps says it's on the got to grab the wings where they fall.
Summer says it Grumps me.
Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game. Good game.
Gaga Grumps says I need an all green song now. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Level up.
Gaga Grumps says, but first a quick segue for this. Level up in the room for Grumps.
It's a LLL level up.
Crystal says W.
Level up.
Guessed it right. Now here we are. Another
Summer says that gift was so cool.
what was led Cersei, you'd spell wow. This level's ours. Come bow with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle, so
Level up.
support came in. Guess it's now.
Gaga Grumps says a quick segue for this. Level up in the room for.
New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you help me thrive. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant brains. Remember that.
Level up.
Crystal says Grumps.
Scaffold Steve says woohoo 300 minutes. Gaga Grumps says yay Steve. One of us. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says I have Steve's emoji stamped on my head. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. E. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Thanks for the follow.
Scaffold Stiff says I'm sorry.
Like a thong, race to the top. Like a thon, tap and don't stop. Like a thon, who will be crowned? Like a thon. Thanks for the follow. Gremlin renowned. Like a thon, fingers on fire. Like a thon, gremlins don't tire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says creative cannot catch a break lol in Storm's crystal with the ranking crown.
Grumps says at Crystal I knew what was up when you left the room.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with E please Crystal.
Crystal says at Grumps lol I had to get coins.
Summer says I thought it was Grumps that got sniped.
Gaga Grumps says thank you.
Crystal says edict.
Gaga Grumps says edict you got.
The creative one says, I can't seem to get a word in today.
Crystal says it's summer. I did to that is why I did it.
Gaga Grumps says Yellow ET wants to go home.
Scaffold Steve says stone.
Summer says table.
Crystal says at LL Creative 1 Surrey thought Grump had it.
Gaga Grumps says stone fits.
Charmaine says stove.
Scaffold Stiff says I got robbed.
O Creative 1 says store.
Gaga Grumps says a nice trap for fireworks.
Crystal says robbery going on right here.
Summer says at scaffold Steve plus equals.
The Creative 1 says filler.
Gaga Grumps says guess for fireworks.
Crystal says LVRK liver.
Gaga Grumps says store first. LL Creative 1 says lava for filler.
Grump says at Summer R, the bully has awoken.
Summer says it Grumps.
Crystal says KV.
Summer says, what a game.
Gaga Grumps says had to be the last one lol.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box!
Scaffold Steve says that was close.
Don't let her lose! Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those
Gaga
stickers
Grumps
fly!
says nah, we had same options as guesses.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady?
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Gremlins, let's go!
The Creative 1 says we should have done it in alphabetical order. Lol.
Gaga Grumps says indeed. Gaga Grumps says okay, last game of the day coming up.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says last letter for last game we are starting with A. Z. LL Creative One says last board last letter of the alphabet. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire,
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Thanks for the follow!
Gaga Grumps says finally, your word starting with Z please creative.
Grumps says at Aris no audio, ever.
LL Creative One says zebra.
Gaga Grumps says zebra you got.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure it out. Oh no. Wipeout.
Gaga Grumps says music fits.
Scaffold Stiff says silly.
Gaga Grumps says yellow S and I in need of homes. Gaga Grumps says silly for fireworks. Gaga Grumps says denied.
Charmaine says stink.
Gaga Grumps says Ms. LHYN in the house for the last game. Gaga Grumps says swing works.
Crystal says Swift.
Grumps says Swift.
Well, Creative One says Swish.
Well, Creative One says swipe.
Thanks for the follow.
Well, Creative One says filler.
Crystal says FBS flips.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says I think it's between Swift, Swish and Swish.
Oh Creative One says fishy for filler.
Grumps says calm down, guys.
Gaga Grumps says Swift it is.
Summer says at Grumps tell M Grumps.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 PM UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga.
Oh Creative One says at Gaga and Grumps, we thought alike on the filler.
Summer says at Freddy check her pinned video.
Scaffold Stick says good evening all.
Gaga Grumps says we did.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says I am non-speaking. There is a pinned post on my page explaining.
Summer says bye-bye.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your